Um, I think we often disregard how much humbleness has an effect on us, you know, especially when you get older, you realize how much being humble has an effect on you, regardless of where you are. And I think that keeps playing back in my life over and over. I get reminded about how humble I should be, you know, for one, being grateful for what life has given me and provided for me today, looking at where I came from, you know. Because when we were going to school, I remember we used to have school uniforms, of course. But because the khaki uniform was the same color as the police uniform, so often my mother used to get her dress, her uniform dress, and take it to the tailor. And there, from that piece of cloth, they used to make for us shorts. So my two brothers then, um, we had our uniforms made out of my mother's clothes. Um, and then for the shoes, well, first bit of the years we went to school, I mean, sometimes you had shoes on, sometimes you had no shoes on. And when we got a little older, we started wearing sometimes my mother's shoes. So because the police used to wear generic shoes. So my mother's shoes, we used to wear my mother's shoes. My big brother sometimes wore them, and then we wore them in turns. And the shoes were called Odomel because of the then serving Inspector General of Police. So we used to call them Odomel, the shoes. And I wore them a couple of times, plus also a couple of other friends of mine. I remember Semanda Moses wore them. Um, Many guys from the barracks, you know, we always wore our father's shoes to go to school. So it was not strange. It was actually a feeling of honor, you know, to be dressed like your father, to be dressed in your father's shoes. You know, it was such a great thing to have to feel. Um, but then again, it was around that time that you start to feel like, where do I want to go with my life, you know? And my mother that year had gone to 1993. She had gone to Egypt. So my mother used to travel a lot. She used to play handball for the national team and also for Bank of Uganda as a handball player. So she had traveled a lot since she was 16 years. So from there, 76, my mom had started traveling. So we were used to seeing my mother go away at least every year or twice, thrice a year. She had been to over 40 countries, before she passed on. Different countries, not repeating, the same countries. So that year, my mom had gone to Egypt to play. I think it was the All African Games, and they were in Egypt that year. And there used to be a washing bay down in the barracks. After the offices, there was a washing bay that was started by a guy. And of course, my mom always left us with money home to be able to buy extras and all that. But for me, at that point, I felt like, I think someone needs to have their own money. You know, someone needs to have their own money, and that was the beginning of me becoming entrepreneur. You know, so what we used to do was of course, we had just gotten a fridge. So all those little things were celebrations. You had just gotten a radio, a double-deck radio, Sankei, and then later on we bought a Lasonic. We had a TV. We had added on to the collection a video deck, and then the crowning of it all was a refrigerator, and this one came with a deep freezer. So I started. My first job was washing cars. So I started off with washing police cars, scrubbing tires, collecting water for the older guys who were washing. And this was a little bit embarrassing. So whenever my uncles or my aunties, or even friends to my parents saw me, they would go home and tell my dad, but what your boy is doing is really embarrassing. It really shows as if you have no food at home. And of course, I got punished. My dad used to ask me, "Why do you keep washing cars? This is not good for you. You have to be busy with school." But you know, I always did that during my holidays. I don't think they understood what was happening. But because again, this is the influence of society. You know, society puts so much pressure on you that you forget to live your life. You know, I kept doing what I was doing. My mom came back from Egypt, and they told her that I'd been washing cars. She just told me, you know, as long as you keep going to school, I have no problem with you. You can wash your cars, but make sure you allocate the right time for you. So from washing cars, I used to save a lot of money. It's a culture that I've had since childhood, saving money. You know, I would rather save as much as I've made than spend everything. So for me, money and all those things were like props. I always just collected money. I just enjoyed having money, collecting it, you know. So from the money I made from washing cars, we started making ice. You know, we called it baraf. So you could get sachets, you know, get food color, mix it with water, boil water, mix it and put some sugar, add food color and wrap it. And then, you know, you would go around the blocks selling ice, you know. Of course, again, that was embarrassing, you know. How can you be selling ice at that age, at that time? People looked at us like we had lost it in terms of status, you know. We had lost it because of going low and selling stuff. But we had already had that background from old Kampala in the 80s, you know, selling food on the street. So for us, it was okay to sell. So I saved a lot of money, and then I upgraded my game. So from washing cars, it came a phase where we started, where the police, where I mean, a lot of policemen used to, I don't know, sniff. They used to deal in petrol, you know, benzene. So what used to happen was they used to come to the transport pool. We stayed right behind the transport. We stayed behind the transport. The transport pool was behind our house. So most drivers, police drivers, used to come there and requisition for excess petrol. And the idea was they would fake maybe a journey, say I'm going to West Nile or I'm going to Karamoja or I'm going somewhere, and they would be given excess fuel. So that excess, they would fill their tanks and they would have excess fuel, you know, filled in their jerrycans. So that fuel, the excess fuel, they needed to sell it on the black market. So for them to be able to sell that, they needed courier boys. And yeah, I was one of the courier boys, you know. So we used to carry that fuel, around 10, 11 years. So we used to carry those jerrycans, 40 liters, rush through the railways, go through the small, you know, slums, and end up on Gaba Road. There used to be a collection point on Gaba Road opposite Total, you know, Kano Kiza Vesij's petrol station there. So opposite it was like a smuggler's unit. I don't know where it is, but that used to be a depot for smuggled petrol from the police or from the military. So that came there. So yeah, every jerrycan was, I think, 500 shillings then. It was a lot of money for at that time. So yeah, in a day we filled maybe 10 jerrycans. And then yeah, I had a lot of got quite a lot of money from that trade, saved a lot of it. Later on, part of my savings were what I used to pay for my school fees, or to pay for my school fees and also pocket money when I went to college. So yeah, a lot of what we see today, a lot of what I'm doing today is not simply by mistake. You know, some of these things follow you before you know it. You know, it's a trade that follows you, and I'm lucky and glad that I started off young. You know, I started off hustling young. Still always listen to my mom, listen to my dad. You know, there were tough times, but to us, we didn't feel it. We just wanted to live. So whatever you did to live was okay.